Thanks, Rob.
You got Anthony Team.
Yeah. So we also have Anthony Team here. Anthony, thanks for your patience. And please feel free to introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Council, and thanks for the turnout today, residents. And great to get to hear Mark go before and do a good job of summarising, I guess, how simple the issues that you have are to fix. I'll start by just giving you all a little bit of background on Geovert and what we do. I suppose to give you some context of what I perhaps will go on to say afterwards, more specifically with regards to the challenge that you guys have got with getting the community reconnected. Geovert has been around for 25 years and we work in the natural hazard mitigation space. So exactly the problem that you've got. We build resilience back into aged infrastructure, we build new infrastructure, and we do a lot in the disaster recovery space. Aged infrastructure corridors may be the Great Ocean Road, which had its 100th birthday in 2019. It was built originally by our diggers after World War I. Geovert spent 10 years there, gradually rebuilding the resilience in that 100-year-old asset. We do a vast amount of disaster recovery in transport corridors throughout Australia and around the world, New Zealand, US and Canada. We're currently working on Coranda Range. There's 60 kilometres of road there that's got multiple slips above and below after Cyclone Jasper. And it's an interesting one because that was fast-tracked through emergency works. If they'd done that with your road, you would have been using it again probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. We took care of 4,500 kilometres of road network on the Shoalhaven area recently. Again, similar stuff. It's with the age these roads were built, they were all built with the same method, and there was no flaws in the method. They followed the geomorphology of the landscape down, and they tried to cut it into bedrock. And so what you commonly find, the inside lane has a bit of a cut to push it in, and the outside lane is just side cast material from the inside lane, and that's more or less what you've got. There's no huge deep instabilities. There's a bit of bedrock on the inside lane. That's why Mark's saying the road can get open again really quickly, and he's exactly right. Probably one of the things that was lacked during the construction time and the construction periods with the roads was the engineered fill on the outside, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. One of the things that we've had, I guess, as a business the last 25 years is we've had a front row seat to good and bad. We've been able to see what works and what doesn't. We've also had the honour of being invited to talk and participate in disaster risk reduction conferences around the world. And so when I'm talking about good and bad, I'm talking about the way that the rebuild is facilitated in different countries and different areas, facilitated in different ways for different reasons. Some of it's funding driven, and in countries like Indonesia, it's managing the graft off the top of the funds from World Bank. In more developed countries, it's about trying to hold the knowledge and the IP inside of what might be the local council. So it would be in setting up a central government body involving local council and bringing in contractors to facilitate, which often is the biggest challenge, the spending of the money to keep these things back open in a reasonable time. That's given us a front row seat to how these disasters are administered and rebuilt, and it's in the importance of holding that knowledge of the rebuild inside of the organisation for the ongoing maintenance, and that seems to be a recurring concern with your asset here. I guess in context of the roading and transport corridors, we are also involved in the mining space, man-made holes and large open cut pits. But with the scale of these huge pits and the lifespan being pushed around the world as commodity prices have gone up and up, and you will see that with gold, they push them past life expectancy and they end up with big failures. And we're dealing with these as an expert around the world, throughout Australia, obviously. PNG is far out to Lihir. We've got a crew working in northern Ontario and Canada at the moment, minus 25 degrees Celsius, stabilising the walls of the largest gold mine in Canada. Christmas last year, we were in Kazakhstan, dealing with one of Glencore's massive open cut pits. India, Canada, we've worked in all these places, and the big difference with the mining customers, and you have to understand it's their money, and when they're not mining, they're not making money, so they get to make decisions quick. And so what we get to see the difference, and it's quite stark, between the streamlined decision making of an owner in a mine that will say, hey, Geovert, get in here and design, build this, and we're designing it while the team are mobilising with the gear to build it, versus government, where government's spending public money and the process is a bit more involved, but sometimes the process gets away. And it gets away because the expertise just doesn't sit inside a government to make decisions. And that's a challenge I can see here today. There's a whole lot of people making a whole lot of promises and lots of reports with ARL ratings, and you're all been asked to study geology and become geotechnical experts, but the short and sharp of it is that no one actually really knows what they're looking, and no one's actually built one of these before, except me. And so that's the challenge you've got. And unless you've got someone in the room that's built these, you're never going to get to the answer quick. If you ask consultants to keep writing reports, they'll do that. That's their business model, and they will keep writing reports till they're blue in the face, and you can't blame them. That is just the structure of their business model. They're only doing what they've been asked. Design build. Let me just touch on that for a second, because we do a lot of that in the mining space. It doesn't mean that we will not be using a designer like GHD or WSP, or someone that aligns with the values and can provide the support that we need. What it does mean is that we start with the answer, with what we know needs to get built, and the design gets done concurrently, much like Mark was talking about, getting the road open quickly and carrying out some of the design works concurrent to some of the temporary works and the make safe happening. I'll give you an example. You guys probably have all heard of Gina Reinhardt. She contracted Samsung when they were building the rail line from her huge iron ore mine out to the coast, and they built this extraordinary rail line in a very quick period of time. They cut corners on the blasting, and when they were commissioning these huge iron ore trains, the rocks were starting to fall because they'd cut big slopes. They were 50 million in liquidated damages a month, so they needed a solution fast. We mobilised that job with the equipment while the design was being done. By the time the guys got on site, had done the make safe, the design was being finished, and we were building the work. Where there's a will, there's a way for these things, and the quickest way to happen is in the design build process. There is powers inside government and the Recovery Authority to go to a sole source on unique properties, and especially if timeframes are pressed, and I think that's very much the case here. Timeframes I shared with Andrew, and it got passed through to the government in July. Upper price limit guarantee. It's a unique situation that I couldn't see a solution to for us to try and get this road open for you guys, was to put an upper price limit guarantee in place. It was 203 million, which is a upper price limit guarantee, means if it goes to 300 million, we're picking up the extra 100 million. That's how confident that I am that we can build it for less than $203 million. It's signed by me. It's backed on company letterhead. It's the only concrete thing in the whole discussion that you guys have got. The consultants' reports are all helpful, but they're all technical, and the ARLs are prescribed as per the process, but they still have a degree of subjectivity to it. So this is the only actual concrete thing you've got to get the road open. Getting the road open would mean handing it to Geovert. What it means for the council is that we would take on not just the contract works insurance for any damage to works being built, but we would take on the actual natural hazard risk insurance for the asset during the build lifetime. So we take it off the council's hands completely. So if another disaster happens, our insurance would cover that. So we take that over. It means we got the opportunity to go through, and much as Mark said, we would, if you handed it to me on Monday, I would have the road open by Christmas. For works, it really is a few holes to make sure the inside lane's on bedrock, and a little bit of scaling and a little bit of make safe. And we've got a lane open and there's some traffic management in place. I've had to sit through an hour and a half of listening to people talk about reports and another 3 months of this and another 3 months of that. It's just about brought me to tears for you guys. If you want a solution, you go to a contractor. If you want a design report and risk modelling that you can't do anything with, you go to the consultants, and it's a wheel that keeps on turning. And the challenge that you've got is, unless you strike by luck expertise inside a government, you've got no one informed enough to make the direction to get it moving in the right direction. So if there's any questions after I've chucked that cat amongst the pigeons.
Anthony, thanks a lot for that. Actually, I have a question just to start. This unsolicited proposal to council, has Geovert ever done that before to another council under another circumstance? And what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, we did it to the to SERA. SERA was the central government rebuild authority, Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, which was the example I just listed. GHD, WSP, Oricon, and there's a couple of other consultants. They had the Port Hills to map, and after 18 months of mapping it and not coming up with an answer, it was kicked back to Geovert to do, and that's when we turned around a report for the government in 3 months with all the modelling done and a definitive answer and a definitive program to build the solution to remediate the 26 kilometres.
Okay. All right.
There's no right or wrong to it. It's just a business model. We're a construction business, and we're in a specialised area where we deliver design build solutions, but our business doesn't make money from designing them. Our business makes money from building them.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one question.
Yes, Sarah. Put your hand down, Sarah.
Mark just spoke about the maintenance, factoring in $100,000 a year for maintenance. I know you just talked about warranty, but what kind of maintenance would be involved? Do you think could you put an annual figure on it for council? And how do you assist council in ensuring that happens? Yeah,
that's a really good question. So there's a few ways, and one of the things when people get confused about this with the rebuild of assets like this, the DRFA funding allows them to be geometrically rebuilt to what they were. They're not supposed to have betterment or improvements built into them, but by default, when you rebuild a 100-year-old road to modern engineering standards, it is going to have improvements in it. So you're going to get a more resilient road anyway. And then if there's additional that needs to be done, like a culvert size needs to be increased, or even in your case, you've got really 3 areas that have been affected, they're going to be built back more robustly. Maybe the culverts could be upsized, but probably just as good would be to put a small debris fence at the top of the culverts to stop shit washing in and blocking them up. It's kindergarten stuff, honestly. All these problems come from water and debris building up, and then the water builds up behind it. And I've been to see 100 of these, and it's always the same problem. It's rainwater, surface water, build up, blockages, stuff that's not cleared out. And yes, increasing the size can help. I think increasing the size of your culverts could be something that could be done there for a little bit more, that the council might have to chip in because it's not covered under DRFA because it will be considered betterment. But then, you're looking at something that's, let's say, somewhere between Mark's 80 million and our guaranteed upper price limit of 200 versus 385. There's a lot sloshing around in the bucket to spend a little bit on betterment. I don't think they'll split hairs on upsizing culverts. But you've only got 3 really relatively small programs on the outside edge of the road, which is where, when they built the road, they side cast the material from the inside lane. That's going to be rebuilt. That'll be re-engineered. It might be soil nailed, so you might have a permanent mechanical hold on that's got a 100-year design life. So it's going to be built back better and stronger than it ever was in the first place, because it's going to have modern road building standards applied to it.
Thanks, Mark. Fiona?
Given that
Yeah.
Speak up.
wouldn't the unsolicited go to the Lithgow Council?
I don't know if you heard Fiona's question, Mark. But
No,
she's asking, would your unsolicited report now go to the steering committee and in effect, I guess, bypass council? I'm not sure the answer to that.
I could say something a bit controversial there. The steering committee is going to be like a driverless car if it doesn't have anyone on it that's built these solutions before, and you're going to be sitting here talking about it in another 3 months, another 6 months, and you're not going to have the road built inside of the next 3 years. Sorry.
We're getting that sense. We're getting that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put that in my. I did put that in my letter to, with the offer. What the indicative timeframe is when you start to roll backwards and forwards through risk assessments and design feasibilities, and then then the design's got to be done, and then the design's got to be tendered, and then there's an assessment got to be done, and then there's an award, and then there's a mobilisation. You'll blink, you'll be 12 months down the track, and no one have lifted a finger to build anything on the road. And we had this conversation in July, and you're heading towards February, March now, so it's almost like a premonition. I said 57 weeks when I sent the letter in July, and you're most of the way there now.
Questions for Anthony or Mark? Mark's still online. Any other questions? Katie?
We got told a while ago that maintenance considerations weren't able to be included in the DRFA funding in the application process itself. We talked about it on numerous occasions.
Yeah.
That might have been considered. What's Anthony's opinion on when the applications go through, when we look at this at the very beginning, in considering maintenance in the envelope of money?
I
Did you
think
catch
it's
that?
reasonable. Yeah, I think it's reasonable to ask, and it depends how it's written, right? If you're writing in directly for maintenance, maintenance is cut out of the DRFA funding. But if you go back to what I was saying before, you're having a road that's going to be rebuilt to modern standards, so you'll have a buried improvement, engineering improvement, or a betterment that's allowable inside of the funding envelope. But say for round figures, it's 100 million, and while we're there doing it, you've got to upsize the culverts, and it's an extra, $150,000. Well, they may just roll that inside, or the council may decide to crop up with it.
RA has explained that if we've got an envelope of 385 million. They don't allow betterment. It's a category B application, which no betterment there. There's another category D, which deals with betterment. But if what they will allow, if you build the road, say, for 150 million, they'll allow up to 385 million in betterment. Now, you'd be struggling to find all the bells and whistles you could add onto it to get you to that. But sure enough, you're going to get a bigger culvert to start with.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to get your all of your original geometry back in place. All the width, all the outer edge that you've lost will be built right back to where it was originally. And to do that, it's going to have to be engineered, whether it's, like Mark said, whether it's a cantilevered laying with a bridge and a board pile solution, or whether it's some type of tied back wall, you're going to have that reinstated to its original width.
Anthony, you mentioned before about an alliance model and working with council. One of the problems we had here was a failure to maintain the drains prior to the collapse. What would there be in the approach that would help council understand the methods available? Were they willing to get out of the shed and actually drive down the road to do it, to understand how to maintain this road?
Yeah, that is a good question and something to be aware of going into these things. One of the ways that the government has to fast track this is to sole source. To ensure value, they can go into an open book model where the contractor's costs are audited, It also allows them to look into, in that open book model, the possible alliance. And when we've been to the disaster reduction conferences around the world, disaster risk reduction, one of the things that gets shared of what works and what doesn't work is the rebuild phase. And we tend to, in New Zealand, Australia, go to central government organised, and central government will put in a framework, and then they'll bring in some larger contractors and some of the bigger consultancies, and they'll form an alliance. In countries like Japan, with earthquakes, they tend to push it to the local council. And somewhere between the two is the right answer, where you've got, because you want the local council on board for the alliance and the rebuild so that they're gaining the knowledge of the asset for the maintenance going forward. As far as the maintenance going forward, just a process of what can be done and how's it modernised into a workflow so that you've got a system set up, you're taking pictures that are time and date stamped and going into a workflow so that there's a simple visibility or a visual management system so you can see that the work's being done, because I think often in these assets there's not the manpower to check everything, and so stuff doesn't get done. It gets ticked in a box on a piece of paper that it's done, but there's no evidence. So it comes down to just putting a modern cloud-based workflow-driven system in place that provides transparency and visibility through visual management to make sure that you can see the work's been done, because the council's paying for maintenance, but it clearly wasn't being done in this case, and so you've got blocked culverts and stuff overflowed, but that's easy enough to fix in the process of that. And as you build the asset, you know what you're building, and you can plan the maintenance into it. But I think when you start to think about what you're going to build back, and even you look at some of the preliminary stuff that Mark's done, you're going to have a much more resilient asset built there, even though there's no official betterment built into it. It's going to be built back to modern standards. I mentioned before debris flow systems, simple debris flow systems at the entry to the culverts where you've got the waterway feeding in, just stops material filling them up. And the debris flow systems can be checked very easily and periodically cleaned. It just stops stuff flowing in and blocking them up. Really, really simple things that are very, very cheap.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm just conscious of the time here. Martin.
Anthony, Mark came up with a solution for the major hazard, which was the grid collapse up the top there. Did your assessment or what you quoted on, what was your solution to that top section, where the rock bolts are and things like that?
I don't think we had any immediate concern on that section, and I think we'd included for some rockfall protection and rock bolts. That's there could be rockfall from that at some stage, but that's really hard indurated sandstone. That's just one of those things where I think perception is actually worse than the risk. That'll still be standing there in 1,000 years. What Mark showed you, there's and you see it on all the sandstone around Sydney, there's weaker layers which weather preferentially. So a little bit of dental shotcrete, some bolts in the right place. But a further assessment needs done on what's actually there in terms of cracks and stuff before a final solution's put in place. But that was all costed in. It's not. I know it looks big when you go and stand next to it, but when we're working in the bottom of large open cut pits, we're dealing with 600-700 metre high man-made slopes. It's not a big problem. It's just a few more rock bolts here or there, or a little bit more rockfall protection. I'm not trying to undersell what we do, but say we're designing a slope solution. If you've got 4 or 5 meters difference in the depth of instability in different places, it's a change in the diameter of the bar that you put in, maybe change in the hole diameter, maybe change in the hole depth, maybe change in the hole spacing. It's like going to build a house and just using different size nails on different spacings. It's all the nitty gritty and the engineering can all be sorted out, but the solution is going to remain the same. So okay. Yes, that was included inside of it, but not seen as a concern at all.
I'll just add a comment on that. So the other solution there in the short term is monitoring. So there's a whole heap of remote monitoring systems that you could put on place on the cliffs themselves that would preempt any sort of massive sort of failure mechanism. I know that as part of Golder's work over the last 20 years, there are some survey markers on the overhang at the top. So there's some regular monitoring going on. I haven't seen the results of that or how they're doing it, but that's another long-term solution that would at least provide some warning that something was developing. So that's probably a cheaper option in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's more time based. I don't think we're going to be pinching pennies to do the solution, and an entire solution was costed inside of our offering. We see our mining clients when they've got huge wall failures, and we costed one for Rio Tinto in the Bingham Canyon copper mine in Utah, which is the largest man-made hole on the planet, and they had a whole high wall slipping. And the size and the amount of engineering into that was hundreds of millions. It wasn't worth doing. So what they do, they monitor it, and they're monitoring in a whole bunch of different ways, and they're tracking the acceleration, and they reset it every couple of days, and then they clear everything out of the way 2 days before it fails. So that's the extreme side of monitoring, but it can be done. It might not be the right solution in here, and I think you've got a tremendous amount of funding. It's not going to be any hassle at all to deal with that. And one of the other things that I didn't raise, when we get into coming on site to start to build a solution, we have to do a risk assessment ourselves. And this is the frustrating thing. We're sending consultants off to do risk assessments. We're going to have to do the same risk assessment to put our guys under. But when we're building the solution, because we're under it 12 hours a day, the temporal risk goes up from you guys driving up and down. You've seen in the modelling that the risk increases because we're there for a greater period of time. So what might be acceptable to rebuild the road may not be acceptable for construction. So we may need to build in rockfall protection, and that would be built in, and that would be an asset that would be left there to protect the road anyway. So there's ways and means to maximise the spend for the benefit of the community and for the safety of the construction works. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Anthony. I'm just a bit conscious of the time. I've just got a couple of questions online. First of all, Anthony, has your proposal had any response from the council?
No.
No. Okay, we'll take that. And
sorry for offering to save you half of your funds here.
And Andrew, I think Sarah is asking about any surplus of money could be used to repair the rest of the Wolgan Road. Do we know that?
No, it can't.
Cannot.
It could be used on that gap section,
but not down the track, not down the road. Okay.
I liked Mark's comment about getting the council to pay for the seal that they ripped up, though. I thought that was a fair and reasonable comment.
I'm just a bit worried about the time. Any other questions or comments, particularly for Mark and Anthony at this stage? Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, Mark and Anthony, thank you so much for your time on a Sunday. Really appreciate it.
I just hope that we're not sitting here next November talking about the same thing.
Oh my God.